It's time to lock in. We're talking SEC, college football, and more. This is AP as we see it.
I'm all about the action. I'm all about the action. I'm all about the action. I said I'm all about that action.
Hi, I'm AP Stedham from LA. This is AP As We See It, a weekly syndicated 1 hour show discussing the Southeastern Conference, college football on the national scene, and other sports. Welcome to another edition of AP As We See It. We'd like to mention our social media platforms, plus Spotify, social media platforms on YouTube at AP As We See It. You could find every episode there. You could also find the interviews that we conduct at all the events that we cover, the football games, the championships, the drafts, the Hall of Fame inductions, any type of event that we venture out to get interviews for our audience. That's on our YouTube channels at AP As We See It and at AP Stedham. Also, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and X account, and Spotify. As I mentioned, every episode is archived, so you can check those personal social media platforms at AP Stedham and also AP As We See It. We'd also like to mention our guest this week for segment 2 and 3. It'll be Wilson Alexander from The Advocate in Baton Rouge. Wilson's the outstanding writer, covers LSU football, and we're anxious to speak to him in segment 2 and 3. We also like to mention in segment 1 and 4, we're going to be discussing the Manning Passing Academy, the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, some interesting inductees for the class of 2025, and also there was some chatter by a Florida State transfer quarterback discussing Alabama without Nick Saban. But anyway, there's a Louisiana flavor to this show, as you can understand. We're going to be going to Thibodaux, Louisiana, to cover the Manning Passing Academy. I think it's their 25th year. I believe it's the 25th year for that passing academy. And they'll have 11 SEC quarterbacks. We're going to go over those in a minute. But we'd just like to say that it's going to be primarily a Louisiana-based show, even though it's SEC-oriented, because there's SEC quarterbacks at the Manning Passing Academy. We're going to try to get all those interviews. We'll have them to you up on our site probably Friday or Saturday. The interview opportunities are on Friday, so we're going to get a chance to visit with the hopefully the 11 SEC quarterbacks and some other quarterbacks as well. But in segment 2 and 3, like I mentioned, Wilson Alexander from The Advocate in Baton Rouge discussing LSU football and the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. That's in Natchitoches, Louisiana. That's North Louisiana. So we'll be up there on Friday for those interviews, and we'll have those interviews up on our social media YouTube channel at AP As We See It as well. But let's get right into the quarterbacks that will be present at the Manning Passing Academy from the SEC. There's 11, as I mentioned, and we're going to start off with a sensational quarterback for South Carolina. He had a great year. He's a redshirt sophomore, Lenora Sellers. He'll be there for the Gamecocks. Number 2 from LSU is the redshirt senior, Garrett Nussmeier. He's a Heisman candidate, of course, and maybe even Lenora Sellers. I mean, when you start the season and everybody's a candidate, it kind of whittles itself down organically through the season and their performances and how well they play in the big games, what's perceived as the big games, and how well their team, their record throughout the season, and what they're able to do to bring some W's in that column. Number 3 from Mississippi State, the transfer grad Blake Shapen. He was injured last year from Mississippi State, transfer from Baylor. He'll be there. From Ole Miss, the redshirt sophomore Austin Simmons. I think people are expecting big things from Austin. Good quarterback for Ole Miss. He shows some flashes. Number 5 is from Oklahoma, John Mateer, the redshirt junior quarterback from Washington State. Oklahoma, their coach is on the hot seat. That program, the temperature's pretty warm over there. So they brought the offensive coordinator also from Washington State and the quarterback. So they're looking for big things from their offense because they suffered so much last year with the injuries at the wide receiver position. The quarterback they didn't have a candidate that played well. The two quarterbacks that played, they struggled. The team struggled offensively for sure. If you don't have your wide receivers, you're going to have a lot of problems. You're looking at number 6 on the list is Arkansas's quarterback Talon Green, redshirt senior. He transferred from Boise State. I like Talon Green. He has a lot of potential. Big, strong quarterback, can run. Fairly good passer. Has to show improvement with Arkansas. Sam Pittman, the temperature's very hot up there in Northwest Arkansas and Fayetteville. So Talon Green, I know they're looking for big things from him and that offense with Bobby Petrino, the offensive coordinator. But they're going to have to play much better in that tough SEC to win some ball games. Let's look at number 7 right now. 7 on the list from Alabama, Ty Simpson. He'll be a first-time starter for the University of Alabama. And that quarterback situation is probably one of the more interesting decisions that must be made in the conference. Right, Ty Simpson's the early leader, according to the offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who's first time at Alabama. He's reunited with Kalen DeBoer after being successful with him at the University of Washington. Then we have at number 8, Gunnar Stockton. And Ty Simpson, by the way, is a redshirt junior. At number 8, we have Gunnar Stockton, redshirt junior. He had to play last year at the end of the season when Carson Beck was injured. He led them to the playoffs. They were defeated in the first round by Notre Dame in Atlanta. But Gunnar Stockton, he's the front runner, the starter for the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm not sure if he'll be the starter all the way through the season, but he's initially going to be the starting quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs as they try to duplicate that season of winning the SEC last year. Number 9, Texas A&M University, Marcel Reed, dual threat quarterback, played a number of games last year as a redshirt sophomore for the Aggies. First year coach was there, Coach Elkin. And Marcel Reed looking to make some improvement. The number 10 quarterback we have on our list is from Mizzou, the Mizzou Tigers, Bo Pribula. He's a redshirt junior transfer from Penn State. And so he signed a pretty big contract. I think it was around $1.5 million NIL deal for the Missouri Tigers. And then we have for Texas, Arch Manning, redshirt sophomore. He's been there quite a while, sat on the bench behind Quinn Ewers. And I think his family was fine with him sitting on the bench and not playing until this season, but it's all his right now. He has full command of that team, the Texas Longhorns. They're trying to get back to the playoffs. Arch Manning, we're really going to get a chance to watch him and see how he performs. And I think he'll manage the pressure just fine. How he performs, that's another story. But he's in charge right now for Steve Sarkisian and that offense, and the University of Texas fans. I think they're happy that Arch Manning's going to take the reins right now, be the starting quarterback. They've had a couple of years with Quinn Ewers, and Arch Manning was the situational quarterback last year. Sometime near the goal line, he would come into the game because he had that dual threat capability, but he'll get his chance to make all the throws. And because Steve Sarkisian, he usually recruits some excellent receivers. Steve Sarkisian, his offense is really predicated on calling a play where you know where you're throwing the ball much of the time, a majority of the time, but he will give you a chance to throw deep and highlight your abilities to throw that pass. But Steve Sarkisian, his quarterbacks usually have a high percentage of completions. He likes those bubble screens and like I said, running a play where before you even snap the ball, you know where to throw the football. And then in the other ones, you're looking for that progression, of course. And of course, Arch Manning's been around football since he's very young. And I don't think there's a question about his IQ. Now it's just a matter of, can he be accurate? Can he be timely? Will he get the support from his teammates? Will he have a good offensive line that will keep him upright in the pocket? So I think that Texas is in good stead with Arch Manning. And he needs support like every quarterback. And Texas has talent, so they have to play defense, but they're looking to get back in the playoffs. And I think they can, but it's all dependent upon Arch Manning and in this quarterback-centric era of football, and he's going to be taking command. After this segment coming up right now. We're going to have our first guest, Wilson Alexander from Baton Rouge, the Advocate. He covers LSU, the LSU football. And so we're looking forward with our next guest, Wilson Alexander of the Advocate. So we're going to be right back after these messages with Wilson Alexander from the Advocate, AP, as we say it. We'll be right back after these messages. Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greer's.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. And we're back with AP as we see it, and our very special guest, a friend of the show, Wilson Alexander from The Advocate. He writes about LSU football. Hey, Wilson, how are you? Welcome to AP as we see it.
I'm doing okay, AP. How are you?
Oh, good, Wilson, good. If people are asking you, can't you wait for football? And I always tell them, I don't want to wish my life away. I can wait.
Yeah, I feel sort of the same way. My dad said something not too long ago about 100 days until football season. I thought it can take its time getting here if it would like.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, Wilson, you play football in Louisiana in August and September. It's hot. That temperature, and they try to play at night games for sure. But what is the temperature in Baton Rouge with regards to Brian Kelly?
The temperature in regards to Brian Kelly. I thought you were about to ask me how hot it is outside today, and I'd say, well, I don't know, 90s with 100% humidity.
Yes.
And that's not quite what it is on Brian Kelly yet. It's getting up there. That temperature is climbing, but
Yes.
It's not as hot as you would get in Louisiana in August and September just yet. You're entering year 4 of the Brian Kelly era. And over this past offseason, LSU invested a lot in this team financially in order to front load NIL deals. They had been behind through their collective spending compared to their SEC peers. They've admitted that over the past 2 seasons. And you probably saw some of that on the field. And LSU thinks that, okay, before the revenue sharing era, they sort of decided they were going to change that. They got a lot of contributions from donors. And I think that sort of speaks in some ways to what the temperature is on Brian Kelly, is that the donors still, are willing to buy into this, to contribute to this and back it. But they're also now expecting some things to come from their investment, This is a team now with a second-year quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier as a starter. They've upgraded the talent, they think, a lot on the defensive side of the ball. There's certainly question marks, but as LSU goes into this season, the expectation is probably, I think, both internally and externally to make the college football playoff. And then we'll see where things go from there. But another 8-4, or even a 9-3 season is going to continue to raise that temperature on Brian Kelly, which is starting to heat up here because they just have not made the playoff, and that's the expectation for this program.
Especially with the 12 teams now and maybe moving to 16 beyond this season for sure. How would you say he's done? I'm going to ask you a couple facets of his the program. How has he done coaching Wilson during the games, do you think?
He's done okay, I would say. I mean, LSU has typically won the games that it should win. It's won some close games. I think about the Ole Miss game last year. That's a game that could have gotten away from LSU, and they hung around. They were able to win that in overtime. Obviously, it was the big win over Alabama. But there's just a few things that need to get cleaned up. LSU season openers, still an issue. It's not going to get any easier this year at Clemson. And an issue in that LSU just looks sloppy, maybe a little bit unprepared coming out of the gate. That falls on coaching, and that's happened now 3 years in a row where they just have not looked crisp in the first game of the season. And then in some of LSU's biggest games, you've seen them not really able to keep the score close. And that's something that's been a knock against Brian Kelly for a large part of his career, is some of those big games, his team's not necessarily playing up to the level that they need to. You think about last year getting blown out by Alabama at home, losing a second half lead at Texas A&M. They've still got, some good wins here and there, but they need to, in order to get over that hump, they've really got to be able to win the big games. And that's where, his coaching has to improve.
Wilson, I was just thinking about that. I was at all 3 of those last 3 years, those games, opening games, the Florida State twice, and of course USC in Las Vegas. Yeah, you're right. They were less than perfect. Let's put it that way. What about on recruiting, Wilson? How do you think he's done recruiting? You mentioned the NIL issue. It took him a while to come up to speed. How about recruiting? Do people feel satisfied with his recruiting?
Yes and no. I mean, they've got some good recruits, but and they've had top 10 classes, but it's not like they're topping the recruiting rankings every year. Obviously, last year there was a situation of losing out on Bryce Underwood. They've done a fairly good job of recruiting in state, but they have lost some players in state. I think there was an issue early in his tenure, especially on the defensive side of the ball. He had a lot of coaches who were out, not really from Louisiana, didn't have
Yes.
maybe a ton of SEC coaching experience. And that you probably saw some of that on the recruiting trail. And Brian Kelly said that on a podcast appearance recently, how he thinks sort of the mistake he made early in his career was maybe some of those internal things. And they've tried to correct that over the past few years. This is now a coaching staff that has a lot of Louisiana influence on it. Kelly is, I think, very aware that they need to lock down the borders of the state, especially this upcoming year in 2026. There are a lot of highly touted players in Louisiana. But even just, you think about over the past years, like they were able to keep Dominic McKinley, a five-star defensive tackle, able to get him back after he had committed to Texas A&M. But then this past year, five-star defensive lineman Jakeem Stewart goes out to USC. So there's hits and misses within it, and their recruiting probably needs to get a little bit better if they're going to get to where they want to go. Still, it's good, but it's not yet at that great level, and that's what LSU expects.
I know he put an emphasis on recovering players who committed early to a school outside of the state, maybe went to that school, but then on the rebound, he was looking to have some of those players come back to the state. He still emphasizes that, I believe.
Yeah, certainly to a degree. I mean, when you're looking in the transfer portal, if there's somebody from Louisiana who hits the portal, everybody who covers LSU, I think all of our ears perk up, sort of eyes sort of like,
Right.
okay, that might be someone they're targeting then because
Yes.
of that connection. That was certainly a heavy emphasis on that when they first came back and over the first few years. Not to the same degree this year. When they went into the portal, that wasn't really the emphasis. The emphasis was more so on players with experience, guys who could come in and start right away because they really needed that on defense in particular. And you have a lot of guys, and that's actually a really big difference. A lot of these transfers aren't Louisiana people who are coming back to the state. It's guys who are trying to just find somewhere to go for a year, try to compete for a championship. And that is a shift from what they had over the first few seasons.
You mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. I believe he's a Heisman Trophy candidate. Somebody of that caliber had a pretty good season for them. What can you tell us about Garrett Nussmeier that maybe he has to improve in certain areas?
He's got to do two things in particular. One is his overall management of the running game, and by extension of that, sometimes just using his legs when there's nothing there in the passing game instead of forcing something. It's okay to just pick up 7 yards with your legs, to slide. That's all right. It's not a huge part of his game. He's not going to be a Jaden Daniels. He's probably not even going to rush for like 500 yards. But if he rushed for 300 yards, then I think LSU would be pretty excited about that. And he understands it. That's something that he's trying to work on this year. We saw glimpses of it in spring practice. The other thing is consistency throwing deep downfield. LSU, when it hit on the deep ball last year, had some success. Garrett's got a really strong arm, but they weren't consistent in those throws, and that's something that's really got to change. Part of what might help with that is having some healthier, faster wide receivers, like your fastest wide receivers being healthy. I mean, Chris Hilton last year was their speedster down the field, the guy they expected to stretch defenses vertically. He was out almost the entire season. When he did come back and get healthy and get on the same page with Garrett with their timing, he caught 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. So they think that can make a difference. They also signed Barry Brown from Kentucky, another guy who's really, really fast. They think that could help too, as Garrett tries to improve that deep ball accuracy, because that's going to be a key for him. And then, I said only 2 things. I think I would be remiss to not mention the third and maybe the most glaring, which is the interceptions. He's got to cut down on the picks. That's always kind of been a thing for him, is some of those mistakes. He showed up in the first year as a starter as well, some of that recklessness at times. He's got to reel that in if he's going to be the quarterback everybody thinks that he can be.
You mentioned some of those explosive players on the outside. Any other player you want to mention to help support the quarterback, maybe the tight end position or any other receiver?
Yeah, that tight end position with 2 guys there, Bauer Sharp and really Trey'Dez Green is probably the most intriguing player. I think Bauer, an Oklahoma transfer, could be a really reliable target for Garrett. We saw them connect a few times in the spring. It seemed like they were pretty quickly on the same page. He made some impressive plays. But Trey'Dez Green is the one who's the athletic freak, I guess. I don't like using the word freak, but
No.
it's just sort of he is just this. He's incredibly impressive from an athletic standpoint. I mean, he's 6'7". He's got a basketball background. He can run downfield. He's so smooth, and we saw it really late in the year, especially in the bowl game against Baylor. How often Garrett Nussmeier went to him. I think he caught 2 touchdowns, if I'm remembering correctly. He was a big piece of that win. They expect him to only continue to get better as he spends more time on the football field because he can do some things out there that just other guys just can't. It's a mismatch nightmare potentially if he can continue to break out.
Yeah. Put a pause in there, David. Second. That's okay. Wilson, we love the tight ends. We love tight ends and the way you described. I'm glad you went into depth and detail about the description of the tight ends because he sounds like he could play power forward as well for the basketball team. And I've always asked different coaches, and that always is the best matchup if you have an athletic tight end. Nowhere on the field do you have such an advantage in the height and the strength and possibly the speed. So it seems like LSU, they had Mason Taylor, excellent tight end now with the New York Jets. He was very good, but it sounds like that this player that you mentioned could become a star. With Garrett Nussmeier, he's pretty smart quarterback, coach's son. He's probably one of the top targets this year. But anyway, we're going to come back in a few minutes. We're going to continue our discussion about the LSU football team with our special guest, Wilson Alexander from the Advocate in Baton Rouge, LSU writer. So we're going to be right back after these messages with AP as we see it to speak about the LSU Tigers. Go Tigers, Geaux Tigers. So we'll be right back after these messages with AP as we see it.
Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use groceries to go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it.
And we're back with AP as we see it, and our very special guest, Wilson Alexander from the Advocate in Baton Rouge, LSU writer, keeps everyone abreast about the LSU Tigers football team. Wilson, the offensive line lost some players to the NFL. Can they keep Garrett Nussmeier upright?
That's the big question for this team, and really what this season probably hinges upon is that offensive line being able to replace 4 starters who are now in the NFL. LSU added 2 transfers who it expects to most likely start, Josh Thompson and Braylon Moore. But there's a lot of competition that's still ongoing. Really some questions coming out of spring about exactly who that starting 5 is going to be. Really, it's not something that LSU is going to have decided until Brian Kelly said probably midway through preseason camp. It's kind of an uneasy position to be in, especially going into a Clemson game with some really talented defensive linemen up front over there at Clemson. But that's the situation that LSU is in. They were a pretty good pass blocking team last year. They were not a very good run blocking team.
No,
they've got to be able to be much more physical up front while also continuing to give Garrett Nussmeier plenty of time in the passing game.
Yeah, Clemson usually has some good defensive linemen for sure. What about the running back position, Wilson? I know they need the support up front, but do they have capable people at the running back position?
It appears that they do. Caden Durham is back as a sophomore after a really promising freshman campaign. They've also got Caleb Jackson is kind of an interesting piece. He had some flashes as a freshman, but he added some weight. He didn't feel as fast last year. He said he struggled with it even himself. And so that's somebody who looked okay in the spring, though. We'll see if he can contribute in some way. But the really exciting piece is now 5-star freshman Harlem Berry. He needs somebody who needs to add some weight to his frame, Brian Kelly said, just as you often need to coming in as a freshman to get ready for the SEC. But he's athletic. He can catch the ball out of the backfield really nicely. And that seems to be maybe a way that he could contribute pretty early as he kind of gets caught up to speed on everything else. But those are probably the top 3 there in the backfield for LSU this year, with Caden Durham leading the way.
Mm-hmm. We're going to switch to the defensive side of the ball. Perkins, he's still there with LSU, right? It feels like he's been there a while, but I think he's had those flashes early in his career, but I think he's been a mystery man.
Yeah, it's just been a question as to where should LSU be playing him. The
Right.
first the first game the last 2 years, there was an attempt to get him at inside linebacker. That never worked out properly. Both years, he ends up switching to sort of a strong side outside linebacker role. And both times he wasn't around the ball like he was as a freshman, and he wasn't quite as productive. He was okay as a sophomore in 2023 on a defense that was absolutely terrible. It's tough to fully
Yes.
judge that. But last year, on the defense that was improving before his ACL injury in the fourth game, it wasn't quite clicking right. You know, he seemed a little hesitant. He wasn't playing nearly as fast. He was missing some tackles here and there, and just not as productive as you would expect a player with his athleticism to be. Here going into this season, back as a senior, not really something we ever expected, but the injury kind of, I think, probably helped lead to that. Is he's going to be playing the star position? It's kind of a hybrid nickel safety linebacker role. You often hear defensive backs playing that position, but
Yes, you
LSU
do.
thinks that Harold Perkins can do that because it's going to get him down sort of within the box. Major Burns played it last year for LSU, and he was often kind of near the edge, floating around out in space. And LSU think that that can be a position that's well suited for Harold Perkins. We'll find out here for the third year in a row if the questions about what his position needs to be finally gets answered.
Yeah, maybe the light switch is turned on for him. Sometimes that happens, and you're thrust into that position as a senior. Sometimes uh, you play much better and produce for your team. So let's hope that happens for the Herald and the LSU Tigers. We mentioned Clemson that very first game. That's Death Valley versus Death Valley. Is that what that game is, Wilson?
Yeah, I guess the winner gets the rights to the name.
Yeah, they should get a sponsor there somehow. I don't know how, but there should be a sponsor involving those two monikers and that challenge, right? I don't know what you can use involving death, right?
Yeah, that it sort of limits you, I would think, in some
Death
way.
and Valley, yeah, something with Valley, maybe. I don't know, but I don't know. But the special teams now. How do you feel about the special teams, Wilson? The kicker, the punter, because we know tight ball games. I'm looking at that kicker, and it's
We also
that
know
day.
that yeah, we also know that in times here under Brian Kelly, the LSU special teams has left something to be desired when they
Yes,
flat out struggled. The kicker is going to be Damian Ramos, and maybe a combination of Aaron Burrell, who was their kickoff specialist a year ago, a freshman last season with a really big leg. But Ramos is the one who's been the place kicker for the past few years, and they trust him, but particularly under 50 yards. He started to stretch out his distance, but that's where it seems like most obvious that he will go out. The punting is the thing that's really got to improve. Last year, LSU was last in the SEC in average yards per punt with a combination of guys. Now this year, it's Grant Chadwick. He's going to be the punter, most likely a transfer from Middle Tennessee State. He had a good freshman year last year over there, and now he's going to have to come here to LSU and really improve that punting game. I think the job is most likely going to be his, and so that's a big thing. Yeah, also in the return game, though, it's interesting. Barian Brown, who we already mentioned at receiver, is somebody who I think returned 5 kickoffs for touchdowns at Kentucky.
he's
And
good.
so he's somebody who's got a lot of speed. And if LSU can set some things up in the return game, then they think that they can continue to improve there.
Yeah, I like Marion Brown. I saw him play at Kentucky a number of times. Good player. I don't think he's reached his potential. I think he probably underperformed in some areas as a receiver, but the return game, he's been outstanding. So that's a big plus for them, big positive, getting that former Wildcat to become a Tiger. When you look at the schedule, Wilson, and you're trying to micromanage the wins and losses from your perspective, what needs to happen? The home games versus the away games?
Yeah, I mean, they really need to win the Clemson game to start the year. But I
Right.
think that for an LSU fan, you also kind of need to go into that not expecting them to. That's a really tough matchup week one with a Clemson
It
team that's
is.
got a lot of experience. So if you lose that, I mean, you really can only afford one more loss. That's really all it comes down to. And 2 weeks later, they've got Florida at home with DJ Lagway after the Gators beat them last year in Gainesville.
That's right.
So it's really probably all about, I think, early in the schedule, getting off to a good start. Because a few weeks after that, they go to Ole Miss. Early in October, they play South Carolina at home. It's kind of I think it's hard. I say I think because it's hard to project teams, but it seems like a front half of the schedule is probably more difficult than the second half, depending on how some of these teams shake out outside of that
Right.
Alabama game in November. So if LSU
Right.
can probably get through the October with one loss, then it'll be feeling like it's in a good position to make the playoff.
Mhm. Wilson, is their last game Oklahoma? Is that on the road?
That's right.
That's on the
Yes,
road.
in Norman.
That's what I thought. Yeah, they're revamping that offense, so that might be a challenge. We'll find out. By that time, we'll know some more about the Sooners as well. But when you look at the early schedule, 1-1, you got to be 1-1, right? That's it. You can't lose two. You've got one win, one loss That's got to be your worst scenario right there. Because if they're 0-2, it could be brutal in Baton Rouge if that's the start, and you're trying to make the playoffs, especially as we mentioned, the 12-team playoff. When the school or their fans, the alumni, they don't make the playoffs now, it's really a difficult situation because you have very little excuse. Primarily the SEC, when they're usually going to get minimum 3, let's say, teams, maybe even 4. Like last year they had 3. I thought last year they should have had just 3. I think that was the right number for them. I was going to ask you about the Manning Passing Academy. You've been there once before. What was your impression of the Manning Passing Academy? Garrett Nussmeier will be there, by the way, scheduled to be there.
Yeah, I mean, it's an impressive event to have in South Louisiana. I think we're pretty blessed down here to be able to, one weekend in the summer, have a lot of top quarterback talent in the country all sort of descend on Thibodeau. And it's the impression is just that the Mannings and everybody over there does a really good job of setting that up, making it accessible. Those quarterbacks seem to get something out of it, so they keep coming year after year. It's going to be interesting this year having Arch there now as he heads into being the starter at Texas. He'll be at the Manning Passing Academy too. But, Cade Klubnik is there, and as you said, scheduled to be there, and a lot of top quarterbacks there. It just year after year, they continue to attract a lot of talent down to Thibodeau.
Last minute and 30, we want to ask you about the rest of the defense, the defensive line, the secondary, so important in this quarterback-centric era, Wilson.
Yeah, there's a lot of new faces on the defense for LSU this year as it heads into the second year under Blake Baker. Their secondary is going to look a lot different. Defensive end, they brought in 3 transfers who are going to be expected to, have key roles. The defensive tackle position is a little bit of a question mark, I would say. There's some young guys that got to step up and continue to develop, like Ahmad Breaux and Dominic McKinley. They also got a transfer in Bernard Gooden from USF, who's going to have a role on this team. The secondaries, though, is really fascinating. I mean, they're going to potentially, like I said, have 4 completely new starters at corner and at safety. And that's going to really determine in a lot of ways what happens with this team. They've really focused on that. But now last year under Blake Baker, they revamped the coaching staff, but the personnel was pretty much the same. So there always felt like there was a fairly low ceiling for what that defense could be. Now, your second year under this new coaching staff, but a lot of new players, they think that their ceiling is higher for what they can accomplish defensively, and maybe they can start to become a top 25 defense again.
Yeah, that's high adventure when you have new starters in the secondary, because it's like a chorus line. I always say everyone has to be in step. If not, the reviews are not very good, and the performance as well. So, but Wilson, we really want to thank you for being a guest on AP As We See It. Let people know how they can find you.
Yeah, on Twitter at WHAlexander_, or all of our LSU coverage is at theadvocate.com. You can also find our podcast on YouTube, LSU Tigers on NOLA. It's a good place to keep up with everything going on with the Tigers.
And we'll be right back after these messages with another segment of AP As We See It. We'll be right back. Thank you, Wilson.
Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it.
And we're back with AP As We See It, and we want to thank our outstanding guest, Wilson Alexander of The Advocate in Baton Rouge. He covers the LSU football program. He's excellent. Just check him out. Get a chance to read his material. I'll probably see Wilson at the Manning Passing Academy, matter of fact. But anyway, we want to thank our sponsors. We didn't have a chance to do that. Greer's Markets, that's 29 locations, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi. They have Lucy's Outstanding Recipes. She has a book out. You can buy it online or in the stores. We have the Groceries to Go, delivered to your home, your office, any venue. You watch all those football games, the basketball games, the baseball games, softball games, gymnastics related to the SEC and other teams. But click on the groceries to go, and they'll deliver for you the from the Greer's Markets. They have the weekly specials online. They have the coloring contest monthly for the children. All the special occasions, holidays, the birthdays, the anniversaries. You can get the fresh produce, the dinner essentials, delicious food and snacks. They're at unbeatable prices. And remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. That's right. Greer's got it. They guarantee it. We also like this to thank the Cortland Grand Hotel in Atlanta, downtown Atlanta. We'll be staying there for the SEC Media Days in mid-July. The spacious rooms, beautiful rooms with the walk-in showers, the pool that's indoor with the serene tropical setting right in the heart of Atlanta. There's restaurants there at the hotel, and they have the outstanding buffet breakfast cooked to order on the weekend. So you call Ben Giacomo and staff at the Cortland Grand Hotel in downtown Atlanta. I know you'll be satisfied. Parking, everything is close by. You really enjoy yourself. We can't wait to be there for the SEC Media Days in mid-July. We'll be there all week. But we want to continue with the Manning Passing Academy. We mentioned all the SEC quarterbacks, but we're also going to get a chance. There's probably around 40 plus camp counselors that are the quarterbacks from schools and colleges and universities all across the country at different levels too. But we've always enjoyed visiting and being a part of that camp because you get the opportunity to speak to the quarterbacks, 11 SEC quarterbacks. We're going to try to have all those interviews available. Plus, we're also going to try to interview some of the other quarterbacks. Some of the other quarterbacks that will be there, Rocco Becht, coming off the championship game in the Big 12. He's a redshirt junior. Penn State, maybe the number one team in the country, the top team in the Big 10 preseason. The senior Drew Aller will be there. Louisville quarterback, redshirt senior Miller Moss, transferred from USC. The Clemson quarterback, Cade Klubnik, the senior. And some of these teams, for instance, Louisville plays Kentucky, as we know, the SEC team. Clemson, they play LSU. So that's why we're going to speak to Cade Klubnik, besides them being a national championship contender. So Cade Klubnik of Clemson, the senior, will be there. Then you also look at Baylor, Sawyer Robinson, the redshirt senior. Now we know that Baylor hosts Auburn on a Friday night in Waco, Texas to start this season. That's August 29th. We have Arizona State redshirt sophomore Sam Levitt, was in the Big 12 championship game, made the playoffs. So they're playing Mississippi State. We have the Kansas redshirt senior quarterback Jalen Daniels. That the big rivalry with Missouri, that goes back way back to the Civil War. That rivalry, those two states, they don't get very friendly that day. So Jalen Daniels, Georgia Tech, the redshirt senior Haynes King. We know that Haynes transferred from Texas A&M. They played Georgia, an SEC team. We know that Syracuse, the redshirt junior Steve Angeli, transferred from Notre Dame. Syracuse opens up the season in Atlanta against the Tennessee Volunteers. So that city will be orange that weekend. Well, the Syracuse orange and the Tennessee orange, they'll be competing against each other. But we want to go back to that SEC, the Manning Passing Academy for a moment. I just mentioned that it's about 1,000 plus campers. There's 40 plus camp counselors. Archie Manning, Peyton Manning, Cooper Manning, Eli Manning will all be present. They're there every day. We get a chance to visit with them on Friday, but it's hosted by Nicholls State in Thibodaux, Louisiana, west of New Orleans, and it's hot out there, but it's a good time. All the campers and the counselors, they really enjoy themselves, and the counselors, the 40 plus counselors, they have a passing competition on Friday evening. There's golf carts that are coming across the field horizontally. There's a box and there's the target, and then the golf cart, the last throw is a vertical throw down the field, trying to hit the target on the box, which is on the golf cart itself. So it's fun to be in person, to see the players move, to visualize them up close and personal, their size, their height, their weight, their arm strength, their accuracy in that quarterback competition. It's a few throws they have to make. And believe me, when you're watching them throw the ball deep, trying to hit that target, very few of the quarterbacks hit the target. And it's a golf cart, pretty big golf cart with a box, and rarely do they hit the target. There's only a couple of them, and that's why they're the winners, because normally horizontally they're accurate on those throws, hitting the target, going across the field. But the camp is fun. I've been there many times. I don't even know the amount of times I've been there over to Thibodaux, Louisiana, but I'm looking forward to it this week. And I'm looking forward to speaking to those 11 SEC quarterbacks, or have somebody speak to them for me. So we'll put all those interviews on our social media platform, YouTube channel at AP As We See It, and maybe some of them even at AP Stedham, our personal one. But we'll have those links on our Facebook, Instagram, X account, and you could click on those. And we're going to try to get a little preview of their personality. Last season, I remember I interviewed quite a few down there, and ended up interviewing Will Howard, the transfer from Kansas State, who played at Ohio State and won the national championship. And we visited with all the SEC quarterbacks last season as well. But just remember to check that out. And like I said, check our social media platform. Another thing, we're going to move on now. We're coming to the close of the show almost, but Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, Natchitoches. I'll be visiting with Nick Saban, who had the national championship at LSU. He's with the class of 2025. He's going to be inducted 2003 national championship for LSU. Those Louisiana folks, I think they should really embrace Nick Saban, because that program was dormant for about 40 years. Last time they had a title was 1958 under Paul Dietzel. I know there were some successful years under Charlie McClendon and other coaches, but Nick Saban, he revived that program. And now every year the LSU thinks they should win a championship, where they hadn't won it for 40 years. In 2003, Nick Saban not only was able to win a championship for the Tigers in that year, but he left enough for Les Miles to win a championship as well. So that's a pretty successful coach when you look back at his history. He wins a championship during his tenure and leaves the program in good stead for the next coach to win a championship. So you had a couple of championships at that time when you hadn't earned a championship since 1958. So 2003, and then a few years after that, Les Miles won the championship as well. We're also going to interview Andrew Wentworth, the 4-time NFL Pro Bowl lineman. He was a champion at West Monroe High School and with LSU. With those Tigers and with the Los Angeles Rams, he won a Super Bowl. So he had a very unique and outstanding high school, college, and professional career. Not many people could say that they won a championship at 3 levels. So we're looking forward to being up there at Natchitoches, Louisiana, for the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame class of 2025. Those are 2 people that we're going to try to interview. They have several others that will be inducted as well with the class of 2025. So like I said, it's a Louisiana flavor, this show, discussing the Manning Passing Academy in Thibodaux and the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame at Natchitoches, Louisiana, class of 2025. But now we want to move to another subject matter, and this concerns Thomas Castellanos. He is a quarterback at Florida State, played at Central Florida, also played for Bill O'Brien, the former offensive coordinator at Alabama. He played there at Boston College. He was demoted, so he entered the transfer portal. So he's going to be playing for the Florida State Seminoles. Their opening game is in Tallahassee against Alabama. And Thomas Castellanos from South Florida, he had some words about this Alabama team because he does not fear them. He said that Nick Saban can't save them, and he also said he did not think that Alabama could stop him. So that's a little chatter. And it's from Florida State's transfer quarterback. It hasn't played it down for them, but is it fun to have this before the college football season begins? Probably. I don't think it was that brazen, really. He said a few things. All quarterbacks say you want your quarterback to be confident, but I'm sure it's Alabama. They know about this statement and about this declarative statement that he's made, and he's not afraid of Alabama because Nick Saban's not there, and he doesn't think that he can be stopped. You know, when Jaden Daniels was playing quarterback, I think Thomas was the second leading rushing quarterback at the FBS level. So he is a good dual threat quarterback. How he fares in Mike Norvell's system, that remains to be seen, but Alabama will be ready. When you're playing a team like Florida State and Florida State's playing Alabama, there's little motivation by the head coaches. That's why you schedule those games, really those big non-conference games early. You want your team ready and prepared. But anyway, at the end of the show, we want to thank our outstanding guests, Wilson Alexander, our sponsors, Greer's Markets, and the Cortland Grand Hotel in downtown Atlanta. And we'll be back next week, but look for our interviews from the Manning Passing Academy and Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame on our social media platforms at AP As We See It and at AP Stedham. So we'll be back next week with another edition of AP As We See It. Thank you.